Can you hear me? We've got some people in the lobby. Hopefully they'll come in and take a seat. I'm one of the leaders of a new organization called the West Plains Water Coalition. We started with incorporation in February and a meeting at my house in December with about a dozen people from Deep Creek Canyon. And what we have in common is PFAS trouble in our water. And the more people we talk to, the more complicated and widespread we found the concerns to be. And we found the government not very responsive and not very transparent. And we decided that this was such an important issue to our community that we should do what we can do to get organized and share what we all have an opportunity to learn. Part of the costs of this meeting tonight and all these educational materials is paid for by a public participation grant from the Washington State Department of Ecology. And the idea of that grant is that the citizens could and should be involved in this sort of government cleanup work. So they're helping us to spread the word. We got a $60,000 grant this year to do publicity, to buy stamps, to do a website that's coming up, to launch a pretty hefty social media project. Ecology doesn't write the script for us. We may have some opinions that they don't hold, but we're grateful for their award to us to make this possible. The definition of the West Plains is on a slide that has a map. Alyssa, can we go to the next slide? So the West Plains aquifer is this red boundary that determines where the water flows, roughly from the southeast corner of this map, that's on the other side of Fairchild, south and west of Fairchild, towards the Spokane River on the north and the east. This aquifer has been studied for years and years by geologists from all over the world because it's such an interesting and unusual place. Originally made by volcanoes, and then the Missoula floods just scraped all the dirt away, and various ice age formations, and many things under the ground that we can't see. They're paleo channels is what they're called. That's just old channels. So imagine a riverbed that was filled in later with gravel. In your program, you'll see a map that shows those paleo channels. And the mystery under the ground is part of our understanding of what happens here on the West Plains, because it's not apparent. It just looks like a flat place and then there are cliffs. But the way this groundwater pollution spreads is not a mystery, it's a science. And I wish that the Air Force Base in 2017, when they promised transparency, had actually delivered it. But they haven't yet. We're pushing. There are two of us on the board of the Water Coalition who are also members of Fairchild's Restoration Advisory Board. That's Mo Noder and myself. Mo, put your hand up. And so we've got an official role at Fairchild with Air Force Engineering to figure out how to clean up the mess. It's a Superfund site since 1989, so the Environmental Protection Agency is in the lead on cleanup of PFAS at the airport, at the Air Force Base. The same firefighting foam was used at the airport roughly the same time, and state ecology is in the lead on the investigation at the airport. And the twin plumes, you could say, are roughly the west half of the West Plains, and the plume from the airport is the east half of the West Plains. In the Air Force zone, there have been 400 and something private wells tested. In the east zone, that is downstream from the airport, the only wells that have been tested, as far as I know, have been done by private owners worried about what's in their water. So this is more of the work ahead for us together. The next slide, please, Alyssa. This is the educational mission of the West Plains Water Coalition. The first question is, what's going on with PFAS? So our talk tonight touches on that subject. We hope to have a series of monthly meetings over the next year on all different aspects of this PFAS issue. So what's going on? We're trying to ascertain, we're trying to get the news to pay attention, we're trying to get the politicians to pay attention so that we all understand way more of the story in the future than we do now. Second question, Alyssa, is how does it affect me? And the question varies depending on what sort of an operation you have. Do you have orchards and carrots and flowers and raspberries and cattle? Or do you just have a home? Are you a well owner? Are you in the city? And our map making publishing will allow everybody to figure out where your home is on the map and what the risk assessment is for PFAS contamination at your property or in your neighborhood. So the answers are different depending on where we live in the aquifer. The third question is, what should I do? After I find out what my status is, then what's next? And there's one of the answers is consider buying a well test, and consider buying, if you need to, a home filter system to make sure that you can trust the water. There's a display in the lobby of some of the samples of equipment that's available on the market for PFAS filtering at the sink or in your whole house. And the fourth question is, what will the government do? And this is complicated. It's been a long project all over the country. There are neighborhoods just like ours with a similar problem. So we're learning what governments are doing in other places. We're trying to get all the local politicians to pay attention. And it's not just enough that they hear from me. They eventually would enjoy hearing from you. And part of the goal of the project is to help you understand how to be effective, how to actually speak up in your own interest and in the interest of your neighbors. We're curious how you heard about this event tonight. Helps us plan ahead. If you got this card in the mail, would you put your hand up, please? Wow, just about everybody. We mailed to most of 99224 and 99022. If you heard about this by word of mouth from someone you know, and you can vote more than one time here, so about half a dozen of those. Did your social media feed tell you about this tonight? We're just getting started, two or three of those people. If you've gotten emails already from the coalition about what we're doing and about this event, put your hand up. So that's maybe 10% of this audience is already with us. If you like what you hear tonight, we encourage you to fill out this little sign-up sheet so that you get onto our mailing list and that your access to our educational publications and our developing website comes to you in an easy and thorough way. We're also in the process of linking in to the other communities around the state that have the same trouble. The hotspots are downstream from the Army base in Stila, and that's the Army. And in Whidbey Island, it's the Navy. And around SeaTac, it's the airport. And so we have the same chemistry in common with all those other places. What they learn may help us. What we learn may help them. So it's really a statewide issue. Jim's going to talk about the legal implications statewide a little bit later. At around 8:30, the punch and cookies will be ready to serve. We hope you can stick around in the lobby and keep asking questions, keep saying hello to people that you know. We're grateful for the Hub for having us here tonight. We're glad to find a meeting place like this right here in the middle of our own neighborhood, and I'm grateful for their hosting tonight. I'd like you to meet now Jim McCurdy. The next slide, here's a little bit about Jim. And he's a community volunteer, spark plug, not just an attorney. And he's here as a volunteer like all of the rest of us. Please welcome Jim McCurdy.
Well, John, goodness gracious, thank you. Big hand for John. And I am Jim McCurdy. If you don't mind, I'm going to take this coat off. Is that fine with you? And just visit with you. It's gosh, much like Julius Caesar, I come not to give you a law school lecture, but to visit with you. and talk with you about the different things. I would normally, when I'm introduced like this, say, welcome, and it is a pleasure to be before you. I don't know in what we're looking at this point in time we can take great pleasure in it, much less delight, but I do take pleasure in, and I am heartened by this turnout. I've been involved in a number of public meetings dealing with environmental and natural resources and other matters for many, many years, and this is just tremendous. I think that it certainly bodes well for the organization. Thank you, John, and all. And we've got Mo and Michelle, and there's one other here. Is that right, board member? But in any event, this really is something that I think will be a great help and source of energy, if you will, for taking on the issues that we face. If we could, Alyssa, go to the second one. Go back to Jim McCurdy, where you've got all of the different things. Are they up there? I'm not sure. If we've got that one, let me turn here. I wanted to let you know it would be on the board that I've taught a lot of administrative courses, including one particular course that dealt with domestic well pollution. And I spun off a number of cases I had as a private attorney that I will mention from time to time during this short presentation or interaction with you. The other role that I played at one point in time was to be Washington's delegate to the Coeur d'Alene Basin Superfund Cleanup Commission. And I simply wanted to mention that because part of the CERCLA Superfund Cleanup, and I know you have it out here at the Air Force Base, you've got it up at the mine on the Spokane Reservation and around, but part of the CERCLA intention is to bring in public participation. And as a commission member during those years, we really had a lot of outreach. We developed what would be a technical advisory committee of the scientists, if you will. And then we had a citizen advisory group. And I cannot tell you how helpful it was to have citizens like you become part of that process. That's the first time in history that a Superfund project had been actually run, if you will, by a local watershed-based group. It was always top-down from the United States. That didn't fly with Idaho, and so we developed this group made up of Washington and Idaho and 3 county commissioners and the tribe and the federal EPA, and decided what modalities. Can you do that? I need a casting person. So we, again, it was the first time that a local group had decided what modalities you use, in what order do you place them, that took on the cleanup. We hired Terry Harwood as the director, and it has been just an exceptional success. You can't clean up all of the Silver Valley. There's too much lead and there are other things there. Made great strides in it. Part of that success is generated again from the public contact, the Citizens Advisory Committee, and the outreach and the public meetings. And so with that said, this is something that is really heartening, and I am really excited about to see you come in. I've talked with people who have been coming in the doors, and there are people that are in the designated area, there are people outside the area, and in fact, we've got this particular sheet, again, that you brought in. There are 4,000, is that right? Domestic wells down gradient and in the area that we're going to deal with. So again, thank you for coming. A little bit about myself. Again, there's the Jim McCurdy background. Do we see it up here? You can look at it for yourself, and I'll not talk too much about it. But like I said, domestic well pollution course was one. I have this brought out in 1981 to establish a natural resources and environmental curriculum for Gonzaga University Law School, and instituted a couple of things. We had the normal environmental class where you studied the National Environmental Policy Act and the Clean Water Act and the Clean Air Act. We brought in Jerry Boyd from downtown to talk about waste disposal and CERCLA and RCRA and all of those kinds of things. And I had instituted 2 courses that seemed to really play well. One of those courses was this toxic tort course where we chose domestic well pollution, and we went through as students. We had a defense group, a plaintiff group, and built trial notebooks so we would know how to try the case. I took that model out to Vermont Law School, which has a big environmental law program there. The other one was, of course, in negotiation and mediation of these natural resources, environmental matters, that involve a number of parties, if you will, a number of governmental entities from all the way to municipal, to county, to state, tribal, and federal, where you've got a number of parties, exactly what you have here. And we looked at the prospects for negotiation and mediating a settlement. And I found in almost every case that I had tried, there was some element of negotiation and mediation, and I think that's what you will find here as well. So with that background, enough about me. I want to know a little bit about you. First of all, do we have anybody in the room who is one of the plaintiffs in one of the lawsuits that's been filed? How many are we counting, John?
I'm counting. Two hands.
And please,
Nope. More. Thank you.
there are two back here, one over here.
Six or eight, yeah.
A couple, and please feel free to raise your hand or whatever and become involved in this discussion. I'd like for it to be as interactive as possible because you may have information that would be very worthy of others. We also have a kind of wide array of persons in here. Yes.
We've got a treatment shed that was put in by Fairchild, and just yesterday, we got a water delivery that we were not expecting, and did not get a phone call from Megan at Fairchild until today, and now we have bottled water, a water dispenser, even though we have a treatment shed, and they said there's some maintenance issue with it. So yes, I would like to join the plaintiff side of this thing. This has been going on for how long? 3 years. 3 years now.
Okay, good. And John,
And the treatment
collect
shed's a piece of junk.
Yeah.
It leaks. It's just not, we've had trouble with it ever since they put it in.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, that's very helpful. We've heard that story before,
We
right?
have. You're not alone, I'm sorry to say.
Great. And good. Make sure you leave your name, and then we can contact persons who can put you in. I should point this out too. I am an attorney. I'm licensed in South Dakota. And I came over to Washington and never took the Washington bar or whatever. I would always join other attorneys in a couple of cases I'll tell you about tonight, but I'm not a member of the bar, so I can't represent you and I can't give you legal advice. But otherwise, I can tell you generally pretty much what goes on here. But thank you for that contribution, and let's keep those coming, if you will, because it's really going to add to our story as we have here. So we got the plaintiffs. How many persons are on the airway heights, what I call public water system? Counting, what do we have, 4 or 5?
Oh, maybe 10.
10, okay. How many are on what, John, you call these water systems where you've got one well and a number of families tie into
Yeah,
that well?
Group A or Group B, private cooperative, water cooperatives, like an HOA.
Yeah, how many are on those?
That's about the same.
About 10, and we got over 100 people here. How many of you have your own domestic well that's an individual? There you go. Thank you for coming in. That's somebody we're going to talk directly to. I was mentioning before we got here is that we've got a wide range of people. Dave Lamb is here, and you're with Spokane Sustainability, Dave?
No, I'm just
Working here, but in your other, do you wear another hat? You've been involved in matters for years, right?
Yeah, just as a volunteer.
Yeah, volunteer, but broad-based background, right? Have him here. We've got a person back here named Mike Shields that was a career firefighter who's retired now, who actually ran through, what did you say, Mike, training sessions out on the Air Force Base as a Spokane Fire Department person. Isn't that right? Training with the aqueous firefighting foam, isn't that right? That perhaps can tell us a number of things as well. I'm really looking forward to the questions and answers and our dialogue that we will get into. Let's go to the next slide, Elisa, if you will. Is that Alyssa? Alyssa. Thank you. Now, where is Michelle? Michelle's around somewhere? Michelle, come on down, if you will. Who said that? Was it Monty Hall or somebody? I'm not.
One of those old guys.
Now, where is Mo?
Mo's with the microphone.
Oh, Mo, can you come on over as well? Now, this is in the beginning, if we can go to the next slide. Oh, we've got it up here. In the beginning, you've got it there, right? This is the way we do it in law school. Mo owns Whiteacre, okay? It's a parcel of land. Abutting Whiteacre, and next door is Michelle, who owns Blackacre, okay? And I don't know, Mo, what kind of substance do you want to flood down on Michelle? Lye, maybe, or something? You're washing your clothes in lye, and you have to get rid of it, right? So you're flooding it down on Michelle. And Michelle thinks this is disturbing her use. Now, wait a minute. Using lye is fine. It's a lawful use. There's nothing illegal about it or whatever. But nevertheless, Mo's lawful use is disturbing and interfering with your quiet enjoyment and lawful use of your parcel. Is that clear? Marianne, is that clear? Okay. This is, in the beginning, this is environmental law at the common law. Go back to England. You know, the United States inherited its laws. Everybody know about that? The legal system from England, except Louisiana that took the French law from the continent. Okay. So if you're in Texas and you know you're drilling an oil well, you better pay attention to which side of the line you're on, because you've got different laws on one. Oklahoma's a little bit different than Texas too for the Red River, but you don't need that. So we've got this. This, what Michelle would talk about is that this is a nuisance. And how do we decide whether, again, Mo needs to stop flooding the lye or getting the fumes or whatever? Can we have three people right here? Can you tell me your names?
My name is Catherine.
Catherine? Helen. Okay, very good. Jan. Okay. Would you three come up, just step up here a moment? At the common law, we would bring the neighbors in to look at the offending use, human activity on one parcel, the damages that are alleged or interfering with the other parcel, and the human use of the other parcel. We get the next slide. And we then see that, well, the assize, it was called, would, the neighbors in the community would view the conflicting uses. They say they balance the benefits and the harm. Who knows what kind of John actions went in there, you know, who, you know, more esteemed than the other. And they would determine whether the use is unreasonable. So would you three stand a moment and yell out unreasonable? Unreasonable. Sorry, Mo. I mean, hey, would you guys give these people a hand? I'm not sure that this went over well. Marianne and I were involved in Interplayers a number of years, and I like to kind of get the stage business going. But Mo, you must abate your use. Can't, well, the assize. The assize, and that's the way it was done. Your neighbors have said in an informal way. Now today, I'm sorry, Michelle, you simply file a nuisance action in court. You'd bring these people, they'd be part of the jury. You lose, and a judge tells you that you need to abate.
I didn't come here to be the bad guy.
Yeah, well, I know. You're not. It's a lawful use, now what are you going to do with what you have? You can't flood it down on Michelle. You can't spray it in the air where the fumes and particles and so forth go. What are you going to do with it? Mo? Dig a hole. Dig a hole and pour it in the ground, and it is out of sight. Have you ever seen that? Heard of it? Yeah. How many of you have seen the movie or read the book A Civil Action? It had John Travolta in Lowell, Massachusetts, where they did exactly that with the chemicals. It's kind of an Aaron Brockovich without Julia Roberts type thing. there. And so, yeah, that's what happens. You pour it in a hole. In Plymouth, Iowa, where you've got all these paint companies, for years and years, they poured it down the ground and out of sight and out of scene. A great cancer area. What did you do at Rocky Mountain Flats nuclear facility north of Denver? They had nuclear waste, and so they dug a ditch and poured it in it and lit a match to it, and it blew down through Denver. I mean, this is stuff that we have, we've been aware of. So let's give a hand for Michelle and Mo. Come on. So again, if you go to the next one, I think you've got it up here, private nuisance. Today we have private nuisance and public nuisance. It's codified, certainly what we're talking about in the Air Force Base and perhaps the airport and perhaps others. Maybe those that are contributing to PCBs in the Missouri River would be a public nuisance because it affects a number of parties. And as we said, you go to court. We also have statutes, regulations, and permits. And do we have anybody here from ecology or any other government organization that issues permits around? Everybody aware of permitting? Everybody's been involved in administrative law? You haven't? Do you have a driver's license? You've been involved. You made an application, right? They gave you the permit to drive, and if they take it away, then you're going to go after that too. So everybody's been involved with administrative agencies at some time. We have a lawyer in the house, Dave Michaud, that's on here, and that was your specialty, wasn't it? Representing people before administrative agencies?
Mostly just Social Security, federal bureaucrats.
Yeah, well, we all know about that as well. So again, the real purpose at law of statutes and regulations and permitting is to prevent the nuisance that you saw right here on the edge of the stage. Okay, let's go to the next one, if I can get it here on mine. Michelle would say, wait a minute, we've abated the nuisance and we've stopped it. It's not going to go in the future, and that's something we want to do. That's part of the cleanup that you have out here. We want to prevent it in the future and the like, but what about damages? What can I do for my damages? There are two approaches. You can litigate it, take it to court, or you can negotiate. How many have ever negotiated a settlement in any dispute with a neighbor or someone else? Anyone in here? Do you want to describe a little bit about it, if it's acceptable in public?
Someone violated my property, and I called the homeowner and said, I just called the owner of the animals that were violating my property, and she took care of it.
Took care of it?
Yeah,
Is it open range in Washington?
open
at all?
range.
Anybody know about open range?
Yes.
Only in designated areas? Yeah. It's good where, if the animal gets on the road, you have to have known the animal's on the road and then take reasonable efforts to get it off, or you're not liable there. So anyway, but two ways you can negotiate it out, as this person did. I'm sorry, your name was? Katie, as Katie did with the neighbor, or you could have sued, right, to collect what you're going to do. So two approaches. So let me tell you a little bit about the toxic tort case. Now, there are three goals that I have with you tonight. One is to make you aware of toxic tort cases and what they're about, because most of us have never been involved in it. We don't know. So I'm just going to describe them generally. Like I said, at the law school level, they'd say this is sophomoric, but for us, it's good. And we may know more than they do in the end. Okay, keep that in mind. Second thing is to make you comfortable. Enable you to be comfortable with a toxic tort case as simply putting on a coat and going out on a cool autumn morning. And the third thing then in the end is to talk about the current litigation and, as far as we know, see where it's going and explain a little bit about this very complex process that's used in what we call multi-district litigation and what's happening there. So the causes of action, and I promised John I'd get through this in less than a minute, is you've got the nuisance we had down here. Trespass, if you flood something on somebody else's land, it's like you going on. These animals, they were trespassing on your land, right? So you've got trespass, negligence, strict liability if you're dealing with hazardous substances like this, what do you call it, Mike? Aqueous firefighting foam. Yeah, it's, anyway, a hazardous substance, one is strictly liable. If somebody's damaged and you don't have to prove negligence, you're responsible for it. There's citizen suit provisions in the statutes as well, if there's been a violation of the permit, that kind of thing. And then there's manufacturer liability for those manufacturers, 3M, DuPont, and many others that are producing these materials. How many of you are aware of the tobacco litigation across the country, generally speaking? It is said, not by me, but it's said by those who seem to know that this PFAS type stuff we're dealing with is going to be greater and larger than the tobacco things. And we'll talk a little bit, put some stats and things up. So let's talk about remedies and the harms that come forth from this. We know we're going to sue a nuisance and trespass, sue the manufacturers and all of this kind of thing. What kind of damages are we looking for? What kind of impact on you? John, didn't you ask the question? Did you ask what is the impact on you? Is that from the PFAS pollution itself?
Right.
So let's look at this a moment. Property damage, loss of value, is that anyone's concern? Remediation, cost of remediation, if you will. Personal injury, medical problems, is that concern? Raise your hand if that is a concern. What about psychological trauma? A little bit of worry? You know, as lawyers, we call that pain and suffering and so forth. Loss of consortium is a big one out there, but we won't talk much about that. All of these psychological things that come into play. A little bit of fear of what the future might bring if one doesn't have any symptoms now and all. So you want medical monitoring, isn't that right? Kind of an insurance policy for you as you go forward. There's equitable relief, restoration, injunction, stop it. You know, we had oil companies and mining companies strip mine and they drill holes in farmland and so forth, and they have to restore it. Okay. So we'd like to have that going. There are natural resources damages as well. This water, do you call it the water aquifer?
West Plains Aquifer.
Yeah, and it supports quite a bit more than just our human beings. Few wildlife.
Wheat and hay and cattle.
Any irrigation out here? Mm-hmm. Can you irrigate with this water? You can? You are, yeah. But a number of natural resources damages, business losses. In ag, let me tell you about a couple of these cases that I had tried before, and maybe you can relate to those. I went from Texas to South Dakota. Now, I had a background, although I DJ'd and was in radio, TV, then I switched. A cousin lawyer in Fort Worth told me, I said, I want to go to law school. He said, go to the business school and get you something. So I went and got a major in accounting. That's a bane because every time I join a nonprofit, I become the bookkeeper for the thing. But I really liked economics and particularly natural resources economics. Worked for an oil company in between, went to law school, and took oil and gas law down in Texas. Everybody does. You don't want to miss the windfall when it walks in the office down there. And then went up to South Dakota and found a haven for the natural resources attorney. You've got the Missouri River, you've got Western water rights, you've got all of these kind of things going on. And that's within the 1970s and 74. And it was during the first energy crisis. And so oil companies were going around the land and poking holes in the ground to discover gas and oil where they had never drilled before, and that included South Dakota. So we had a number of small outfits that really didn't know what they were doing. So I began to represent a tribe, the Cheyenne River Sioux tribe, and had a couple of rivers coming through, the Morrow River, and others, and it bordered the Missouri River. And one oil driller's out there. Now, I don't know if you know about these reservation lands, some of them, they're checkerboarded. There can be a piece of land just like your backyard. It's in fee simple absolute. You own it with a deed and all. And the state pretty much has jurisdiction. Then there will be what we call the allotment or the Indian parcel of the individual or tribal land that's owned by the United States government. Some of the land was homesteaded under the Stock Raising Homestead Act. So you've got your surface, but who owns the minerals? The federal government. So you had all of these different parcels. And this is one thing that led me to really believe in this negotiation and mediation and collaboration with different entities to get things done, because you kind of have to out there. But there's this one driller that comes in on a piece of fee land. Right next to it is Cherry Creek, okay? And then across from Cherry Creek is an Indian parcel with a homeowner. And these persons generally, we're talking about Indian and Caucasian and whatever out there, we're pretty much all ranchers. This is West River in South Dakota, where you don't have a lot of farming because the land just won't support it. So you got ranchers out there, and you've got these grazing units and so forth and so on. And between 50 and 100 feet from this creek was his domestic well. And if you know anything about oil and gas development, the oil or gas will come up. And along with the oil and gas is the worst water you can ever imagine. It's got salt, it's got everything in the world with it. And so you have to separate the oil or gas from that residue and do something with the wastewater, is what we call it. So there are a number of things you could do in South Dakota at that time. You could re-inject it back into the earth, and that would take care of it. You could spray it out across the land. Anybody been in South Dakota where the wind blows? You spray, Helen, you have. Where were you in South Dakota?
My husband's relatives live in South Dakota, and they live on the Indian reservation.
Yeah, which one? Do you know? Do you know the town they're living in? Just out there on the plains. Now, Mariana's from South Dakota, and she hates me to tell this story, but outside the Black Hills, you know what the state tree is of South Dakota? Telephone pole. You can see it? Yeah, so they're out on the west side. So anyway, it's just amazing out there. So you spray this in the air, it's going to go over, but you know, it's got salt and stuff. You're not going to grow anything there, even grass for the sheep or whatever. After a while, if you spray it, so the state said this water is so bad, state regulation, although within Indian reservation boundaries, said the water is so bad, they're not going to let them re-inject it. And they're not going to allow them to spray it. So they have to figure out some way of dealing with it before they can drill, but they wanted to drill, so what they did is put a hose on it and simply put it in Cherry Creek. 50 to 100 feet from this person's domestic well. And they called up the tribe I was working for, and we simply went into federal court, got an injunction on that one, had to put up a bond, then got the state involved, and I don't know if they ever worked it out or the well was just shut down. We prevented that well from being polluted, but looking at all of the hydrologic forces and so forth and so on, it would have been polluted rather quickly if we hadn't acted at that point in time. Another case out there was involved a rancher in northwest South Dakota. And they were drilling out on his parcel. And they drilled one well and it didn't produce, so they shut it down. And they moved, 300 feet away and drilled another well. It had these tight sands with gas in them trying to hit them. And it was producing a little bit, but not enough, and so they fracked it. Now, this is not fracking like you're talking about, which is deep in the earth and so forth, but they have an explosion, and it breaks the rock up and allows more gas to come up. Unfortunately, apparently, it blew the plug or something in another well, because you drill down through water aquifers, so you have to seal it off, and the gas apparently comes up the side, if you don't do it right, comes up the side of the casing and gets in the water table. And so this rancher would fill up down literally his glass from the sink, and it looked like Alka-Seltzer. It had methane in it. So he locked the gates on them, and the company sued him in federal court, and I went and got that dismissed, which is another story. But then we effected a negotiated settlement. Again, part of that collaboration and negotiation, and they settled on a number of matters out there. I don't know what, they put him on some other water system or drilled him a new well, or what they did. There were a couple of cases out here. There used to be a plywood plant. Dave, was that in Chewelah or someplace? Anybody know of a plywood plant going up Deer Park? Anybody? Yeah, there's one in Post Falls. This was up north, up here. And yeah, up near Colville. But I mentioned Dave because you work with Larry Axtell, who's an attorney in town that's passed. Yeah, passed away now. And Larry had this client, it was a math teacher, lived out in a house, and it was a pretty good distance from the plywood plant. But the plywood plant had this sump of water, and when it would rise and fall, this person's well would rise and fall. So there was direct communication, and the company realized it and knew about it, and they put him on whatever county water system or whatever, they piped water to him. But he had suffered manganese poisoning, which is heavy metal poisoning, which is really tremendous. And so we were trying in that case, working with Larry, to get the evidence that there was communication of the manganese from the plant, like there would be the firefighting foam materials, to this person's well. And manganese 4 is somewhat indigenous, if you will, native to the area, and it doesn't flow in water. But manganese 2 does, so something was converting manganese 4 to manganese 2. And that's what we're trying to figure out. So some of these cases can be very complex, and you have to figure out where it's coming from. It could have been coming from someone else. That's what you have to figure out. You don't have that here. You know, again, where the pollutants are coming from, and that's the Air Force Base and apparently the airport at this point in time. It's much like the PCBs in the Missouri River. We know the 6 generators. There are a lot of others that are byproducts, but the major generators we know about. In some cases, you do not. Now, the last case I'll tell you about is one that was up in Whatcom County. Has anybody ever been north of Bellingham to Linden, Washington? You know, there are a number of dairy farms out there, right? So there's one family that has a dairy farm. Abutting them on the north side is a stream. And it had not been a stream all that long, bless you, maybe 30 years or so. It was a drainage ditch. And after World War II, apparently we looked at wetlands, and we decided to convert those wetlands to fast land by draining them. Anybody familiar with that? Did you ever do that on your farms? Ever? And so there are drainage tiles coming into the drainage ditch. It was abandoned and it became a natural stream with salmon roe and so forth and so on in it. And they decided on this parcel to apply, what do you call it? Is it sewage sludge? Does anybody apply sewage sludge for fertilizer or know of it? Anybody heard of it? And there are processes where you reduce the pathogens. It becomes good fertilizer, but it's laden with heavy metals, copper, cadmium, so forth and so on. So with these tiles, it just flushed directly into the stream. And also, if you don't have the pH at 6.5 and higher and maintain that, the metal molecules will flow with water. And so it flowed into the stream. The dairy cattle are sick, their milk production is down, the people are sick, and their well has been polluted with copper. So these situations happen. Now there's one difference in these cases. Again, these are the cases that I use to get my course together and that sort of thing. There's a difference here. Right now we've got a mass tort situation. Isn't that right? How many people? 4,000 wells, perhaps, public water systems, and so forth. So it's a little bit different. I was going to talk about the tragedy of the commons, and I'm going to kind of skip over that because you've had enough of this. It is that, I'll just be real quick about it, that when we make decisions to use a common resource like water, land, air, and the like, then we have to take all of the benefits into account in making the decision on going forward with the use, and all the dangers. That's John's word, isn't that right? Dangers that we're talking about. Let me have a drink. In this situation, I hate to say, I don't hate to say it, I just going to tell you, like I learned it, all the dangers weren't taken into consideration. Is that right? When the use was made. And when all of the dangers and benefits are not taken into consideration, then we generally result in a tragedy of the commons, and that's what we have here. It is textbook. So if we can go over to, you've got the PFAS over here with the next up here. Yes, thanks, you've got it. You've got the dangers, human health risks, the psychological we talked about, property damages, they're even talk about cell structure and DNA problems, massive water and environmental pollution. You've got an everywhere chemical, as you know, if you've read about it as much as I have, or perhaps more, it doesn't break down. Everybody's got it. They went to the Faroe Islands to see if perhaps they were spared, and they're not. all over the world, everyone's got PFAS in their blood. This is not because of the Air Force Base or any of that kind of thing. It's in cosmetics. All right. What's that? Teflon? Oh, yeah, Teflon, Gore-Tex, all of the different things we're talking about. And I had a slide here. I think it listed all of those if we want to go forward some. Go back one? Okay, yeah, thanks. And so, and there are many, many more that we've got here. There were benefits. There were fire retardants, Mike. I gather there were benefits from the foam when you used it. Is that right? Yeah, save lives, save property, and so forth. And all of those, it made life really kind of nice. I've got a shirt on here, and I wonder how much PFAS might be in the shirt. The carpet, I don't know about the concrete. What do you think about the paint, John?
I don't know about paint.
But anyway, you've got all these health risks that we're talking about here. So the dangers weren't included. Let me go on. So in the toxic tort case, and I'm going to be just probably 5 minutes later than John wanted me to be here, but we've got the public water systems that are suing, like Airway Heights, under San Marian, one of the cities to the north. It wasn't Meade. Deer Park has perhaps joined, is that right? And it's covered PFAS, except they don't know where it's coming from, and you do. So there are municipalities, counties, and tribes that have their own water systems. The state of Washington has sued. As you know, the Kalispel tribe and Casino has filed their own suit out here. You've got what I call community well users, or the water system users that John and I talked about earlier. Domestic well users, irrigators, Kalispel commercial use, and all of that are the plaintiffs. The defendants are the manufacturers. I've just listed 3M and DuPont and foam producers and fire equipment. Then you've got the users of those products that have spread them across the country. And note, the manufacturer is going to say, we only manufactured them, we didn't spread them across the country. The Air Force Base did that. And then the Air Force Base said, wait a minute, you didn't tell us that what we were spreading across the country was this problematic. And there's some really demoralizing evidence that seems to be coming forward of what the companies knew at one time. You know, if you're about my age, you go back where we use cyclamates and Coca-Cola and different things, the sweeteners, artificial sweeteners, that they knew were causing cancer at the time, that they were using it. Nestle's products were a problem, FISA-Hex, all of those kind of things back in the day. Seems to be a story that we keeps recurring for us. So the mass toxic tort scenario we have is the PFAS is a nationwide problem. Manufactured, used, or released in 41,000 places across the country. There are more than 28,000 domestic locations that are known to be contaminated at this point in time. They say that tap water only amounts to 20% of the exposure to the human being, because we eat them, inhale them, rub them on our skin. You go to the fast foods and the wrappers have them. They say that plastic straws are quite a problem for the environment, but that the paper straws are worse because of the PFAS material in them. PFAS are present in 45% of the United States tap water, and again, there's practically no one that doesn't have PFAS in their blood. So what we have in this scenario are really thousands of plaintiffs across the country that are going to bring individual suits against the same defendants that we have. So there's a system we use. I want to go to the next one, the multi-district litigation. It's up here. So they take, under the federal procedure, these massive cases, thousands if you will, and they consolidate them in one district court area to streamline litigation, facilitate settlements that we're going to talk about, and generate consistent rulings. Now, if we can go back one with the Bellwether case that you probably heard about, what they choose, the judge is looking at over all these cases and has in the city of Stewart versus South Carolina, where our Washington cases have been sent. looks at these different cases and chooses 3 or 4 to be bellwether cases. Bellwether is the bell that in Middle England they put on the sheep so they could tell where the sheep herd was. I didn't know in England you couldn't see it, but maybe. So I was in Navajo land with sheep, and I'd put it on a goat. The sheep didn't have enough sense to get in and out of the road, but the goat would kind of lead them out. So that's a bellwether. It comes in. This is a case that will be a test case, and it will indicate to defendants and plaintiffs what the extent of damages are going to be and liability and that sort of thing. And it's all geared to negotiated settlements there. So that's what we're facing now with the Washington cases. So in the next slide, I look at the city of Stuart, which is a South Carolina case. It is the bellwether case. Again, the Washington cases are consolidated with it there, along with 5,000 other cases. And again, cases are being added daily to that. Now, this is important. I won't test you on this, but this is important. There are 3 categories of plaintiffs. This impacts you. Personal injury plaintiffs. All of those that are filing a personal injury claim under either Ackerman or one of the other cases, you can raise your hands again. I think we had more of that earlier, right? That's one category. I am damaged because of the AFFF pollution of my water table and the like. The state AGs can file a case, as Bob Ferguson has done for Washington. And the state generally gets natural resources damages, because as John and I have talked, there are quite a few damages outside our individual households that affect the state as well. And the state also owns the water in trust for the population, as do tribes on the reservations generally. And then you've got the public, what I call the public water systems, airway heights and so forth, that generally in their suits sue for money to allow them to test the wells and then remediate or otherwise take care of the problem. So those 3 classes: personal injury, the states for their natural resources, and your public water systems. Now, many of you have perhaps heard of a class settlement in this case. How many of you have heard that there's a settlement in the case? I talked to some people out on the sidewalk and in the hall. Well, this is what, in this type of litigation, 3M and DuPont both offered settlements. And the court has to certify, if you will, or approve the settlement offers, and there's a preliminary approval of that. And then the court will open it up to objections to the settlement, and will also allow parties to opt out of the settlement of all these 5,000 cases or whatever. You can opt out. The city of Airway Heights could opt out. Again, the other private suits that we have from Washington out here in this area, and there's some from over on the west side as well, can opt out if they want. And we're in the process now of allowing the opt-out the opt-out decision or the objections. Now, we've got, I'm sure which slide we're on. Again, the plaintiffs are 440 public water suppliers. 7,000 additional suppliers are eligible to participate and come in. The city of Airway Heights has filed a $46 million claim, according to my research. And so there's this tentative settlement that's got preliminary court approval. 3M was offered somewhere between $10.3 billion and, under some circumstances, perhaps $12.5 billion. DuPont's offered $1.185. It's reported as $1.2 billion. Notice these are only 2 of the defendants, and there are a great number of defendants. There's the fire manufacturers there. A fire extinguisher company went bankrupt, and so forth. Now, if a plaintiff accepts this settlement, and again, we're only dealing with the public water systems, not your private injury cases. Only the public water systems. If Airway Heights, for instance, accepts this particular settlement, then it waives or foregoes any future litigation on this matter against 3M and DuPont. So this would be a final decision that would be made in that regard. So it's in the process. The final determination on approval of the settlement is not going to be made. The briefing hasn't been completed. And both 3M is on one docket, DuPont's on another, and they have different dates for the briefing, for the objections to be filed. There we've got the opt-out choice opposition. You might be wondering about eligibility to share in the settlement. Again, these settlements do not impact you as a personal injury plaintiff, but only the city of Airway Heights, which would affect many of you that are on the Airway Heights water. So if a person can show their positive detections in the PFAS in the water system, which certainly Airway Heights has shown, Deer Park has shown, you actually got a city out by Olympia on the west side, same thing, or any of the others, you can share in this particular settlement. And then there's a certain calculus, as I've said here, on your flow rates, magnitude of the contamination, and so forth, of how much you're going to get out of the settlement. Now, the briefs that have been filed already by 22 and 23, perhaps at last, take yesterday on the to object to the court settlement or approval of the court settlement, says the 3M settlement includes an indemnity clause which shifts personal injury claims to the water suppliers. So they're saying if you give Airway Heights $46 million, then you deal with the personal injury claims, not us. Many are saying the 60-day opt-out period is not enough time for people to do the research they need to do with the testing and the like to determine whether they should opt out or not. And then the big one, of course, is, wait a minute, the amounts of these settlements are simply insufficient and inadequate. They're not going to cover the cost. Particularly, you've got these thousands of other persons coming in on the settlement. One estimated cost, not my estimation, but by a private entity, think tank, is that the estimated cost of this whole thing for remediation and testing, not personal injury, not the wildlife problems, or I say wildlife natural resources problems for Bob Ferguson and the state, is going to be $400 billion. Again, it's projected bigger than tobacco. There are going to be additional bellwether cases as well. There are additional defendants and manufacturers that are not involved in this particular settlement. Department of Defense is not involved in this particular settlement, so maybe that's to come, and you can get your $400 billion there. There's also some thought, and I simply placed it in as again, John talked about, we need to be in touch with our local and our state and our federal, again, representatives and the like to find some sort, this is an emergency situation in the United States, to find some congressional allocation for these cities to use. I'm going to make it at this point in time, and I would end with it, who's left out here? You got the public water systems, 4,000 domestic well owners. And you've got your personal injury, but there is no grand plan through EPA, isn't that right? Who's now designating PFAS again as a hazardous substances and coming up with maximum, limits there. John, do you see it anywhere? Where do the private well owners come into play?
Almost all these people.
Yeah. Where do they come into play under the legal system?
Well, the complication here is that the Federal Safe Drinking Water Act, of which the EPA is the regulator and the funder, specifically excludes private well owners from the federal drinking water protections on your private property. And so whenever we read a settlement story in the paper that has EPA in it, that's not us. That's those people drinking city water. It's not us. And in some states, the state money has backfilled groundwater protections so that everybody is covered, but not in Washington. So the Department of Health regulates all the city water systems, all the Group A, all the Group B systems, but not individual well owners. And the State Department of Ecology has the duty to protect the groundwater. But they're not used to protecting 50 square miles of groundwater all at once. It's the groundwater downstream from a gas station with a leaking diesel tank. That's the sort of groundwater protections that state ecology has a history and a skill of managing, not big plumes from single source identified pollutants. And so we're just sort of in a gap of protection here, along with 15% of Washingtonians. Most of the rural population of Washington suffers just like us because the government regulations haven't come down towards us.
And so you're pretty much on your own, what, to test the well?
That's
file your-
that's the mission that the coalition has. We'll just keep talking about that.
Yep.
And the fine print in the Kalispel tribe suit speaks on behalf of everybody on the West Plains. Now, I don't know what that means, but at least we're in there. All the we are covered in the Kalispel's neighborhood damages suit
Yes.
in some way to be determined.
And so, again, I think, rather than go on much about that, is that, with your 4,000 wells out there, working on the testing, determine, again, what you're saying, the breadth or reach, isn't that right, of the affected area? In an oil and gas field, we drill wells out, and if it doesn't produce, then we know the reach of the area. I think there's some indication that perhaps it's going to extend further than the boundaries that are recognized at this point in time. I'll let you read, lest we forget, about the Washington state suit that Bob Ferguson filed against 20 manufacturers of PFAS, including the AFFF, in King County Superior Court. 200 Washington water sources test positive for PFAS, and you can go ahead and read it for yourself, dealing with the groundwater there. I'm a little bit over time, 10, 12 minutes, maybe like that, than what we expected, but I did take some questions from the audience. So why don't I simply ask you if there's anything, I would hope there is, on your mind at this point in time that maybe John or Jim McCurdy or one of the experts we have in the audience could perhaps, if not answer, at least talk about and relate to.
And Mo's handling the traveling mic. Yep.
Okay, we're down here on the foul pole seat. Another thing, I'll tell you why they're taking the thing, is that in the years I went emeritus at Gonzaga back in probably 2010, went to San Diego to teach, and all of these years I've been the president and team owner and so forth in a minor baseball league called the Pioneer League. And so when I let that out, most people will ask questions about baseball rather than what we're dealing with, and we can do that after we get through in the punch and cookies, okay?
Quick question. The Kalispel suit that you mentioned who is the defendants? Are they suing manufacturers or distributors? Who are they suing?
They're suing the manufacturers and the Department of Defense.
Okay.
And the damage in that suit was that the Kalispel Hotel, the Northern Quest Hotel, was opening in the same week that DOH shut down the Airway Heights wells. And so the hotel says it's hard to run a new hotel on bottled water. And I think that's a $42 million claim against the business losses of the hotel at the casino.
And I assume that's a federal case?
Yes.
And the South Carolina one, is that also?
That's a federal case.
The federal,
Yes, sir.
but the Ferguson case is King County
Ferguson case
Superior
is
Court.
King County, and we'll see if that's removed to federal court, or we have our lawyer type things we do. But we'll see, yeah, King County, real interesting. He knows what he's doing, get a local jury, right, to look at this.
So one of the things that will happen eventually is after the bellwether cases, after the examples are set in the South Carolina court, all the other cases then come back to the court of original jurisdiction. So all of the cases from here will come back to the federal court here for the eventual disposition of how bad the damage is, who gets how much
who
money.
gets what,
So
yeah.
it's coming back. So we'll be able to go downtown to the courtroom and see eventually what the outcome of this is going to
Yeah,
be.
have any of you that are involved in these cases heard from your lawyers of any time projection when the personal injury?
So I'm part of I'm in the bellwether, I'm down there.
Right.
And so I'm now pushing into medical monitoring, and been asked to, like, I've had lots of ultrasounds of my liver and my kidney now, and just, how do I go about, like, my granddaughters and the kids who drank the water when they were babies? How do I get them medical monitored? You know, to hear that my vegetables that I canned is 10 times worse.
Let's talk about the irrigation or the watering stock.
But,
you
but
know,
if
both
it's
stock
canned,
and
it's
garden
even
watering.
concentrated, right? It's
Yeah.
more concentrated in my canned vegetables and things. So how do I take care of them? How do I get them tested? I don't know how to get them included in this.
And and again, I can't give you legal advice, but I can say that there are ways you're already in touch with someone on your own medical monitoring.
Yeah, we just started that. Like I
And
just
Who are you dealing with on the medical monitoring?
through Napoli and Scholich.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
Just one
and
of
you
them
ask
called me
them-
and said they needed X, Y, and Z, and I needed to go do that.
Yeah.
And so now that's what we've
Okay,
started
that
doing.
you should ask them how you can then join your children, grandchildren, and any other persons that have been affected. And if they're minors, see if you can represent them as well.
Yeah.
And Dave, is that the way you would do it?
Yeah, either that or get a guardian ad litem.
Yeah.
All the kids.
Something of that sort. But go ahead and talk to, it's Napoli, and who's the attorney you're dealing with? I have
It's Napoli and Scholich, the whole company.
the whole company, yeah, it's not just one?
No, no.
Okay, yeah. And believe me, they've got their hands
They're
full. 'Cause
huge,
they've got
yeah.
thousands of cases, that they're dealing with. But they're the ones for you to ask that question on how you can then get other affected members of your family.
5 years to get that paperwork for my kids.
5 years? Okay, well, thanks for bringing,
There's some literature on the counter by the front door, published by Department of Health. There's a good one sheet called How to Talk to Your Doctor About PFAS. So if that's a concern for you, just pick up that paper on the way out.
I'll tell you now, they don't know. I went to my doctor and said, hey, according to the health department, they told us that they send a thing out so all doctors know about PFAS and how to get it tested. I have had to jump through hoops. I'm still not there yet to get my blood tested. But they're figuring out that my insurance can pay for it. Well, before they told us it wouldn't pay for it. It's a coding issue. The doctors now, there's a coding issue, and the lab at Providence Medical, who's been working with me, has figured that out, and there's a coding issue now that I can go to Quest and they'll draw my blood and my insurance will pay for the PFAS testing.
The more we talk, the more we press, the more we ask, the more will happen. The world will be responsive to us according to how much we do. It does matter.
Okay, I have a question. Currently, there's a class action suit for people drinking the water at Camp Lejeune. How about class action suit for this? What's taking so long to come up with a class?
there are class actions, and then one can then join the class, much as you're trying to bring in other people. There are class actions on the PFAS.
Boy, they're keeping it a pretty tight secret.
Yeah, you're not seeing it on TV like you do the
Yeah,
camp.
and I don't know how to get involved with that, but I spent a career in the military, and every base I've been at's been identified as a hot spot. So my wife and my kids grew up and were raised on this. All of them have medical issues, so presumptively, a lot of them's in the list of things they say PFAS costs, including cancer, thyroid disorders, liver issues, IBFC, and
We'll send you class action information if you sign up
Yeah.
and
Please
say
leave your
that on
name here.
this
okay,
form.
Because, my daughters especially, or both of them, and one's an RN, my eldest daughter said, well, we can't get in on this because we can't prove it caused the disease. And I said, no, it's presumptuous. You grew up drinking this stuff.
Right, and they can do blood tests and so forth and see
Yeah.
if they have it and they've been exposed to it.
Yeah, it's
Right.
Yeah, it's hard. I'll tell you what, that's something else that's hard too, is get someone to do a blood test for it. They don't wanna do it, and
Yeah.
insurance does not wanna cover it.
Well, like you were talking
Yeah,
about.
it's a fight, and, we've had a lot of issues.
Yeah, and thank you for coming forward. That's exactly why we're here. We have, I think, a response.
When we moved out here 40 years ago, I've traveled all over the country as a pipe fitter. And I've worked at Fairchild a lot, replacing steam lines and chemical lines and foam lines and all that stuff. But I'm wondering, when we first moved out here, on the backside of Fairchild over here, they had a Tordon alert where nobody within 500 yards of this spot where they were poisoning weeds with Tordon. When you don't hear about that, is that included in this?
That, as far as I know, is not included in that suit. That would be another.
Well, see, I worked in the cruise missile facility, and I put in all the piping in there. It's all stainless and heavy duty, heavy wall for the foam, for the jet fuel, for everything. And the foam, we weren't done with it yet, but some idiot turned it on and filled the whole building up. Is that particular area of the Air Force Base included in this?
It is not included in the PFAS, as far as I know.
It's the same stuff that they're. It's the same foam that you're fixing about.
Same foam?
Yeah, it's the same stuff.
Perhaps you would join in it, don't you think? Why don't
Well,
you leave your name here too?
The PFAS is all in one category of harm, but PFAS is only the spill number 60 at the Air Force Base.
Right.
Fairchild has been a Superfund site since 1989. And the distinction with PFAS is it's the first of 60 pollutants that's water soluble. So all the others except one, that's TCE, has been inside the fence. And so this is the first time that this huge neighborhood has been affected by a spill at Fairchild. But EPA has been managing cleanups of all these different chemicals since 1989 at the Air Force Base. But the involvement of military personnel in suing the government is a way more complicated thing than us plain citizens, homeowners. We have a different stake in these cases than do military personnel. So the harm at Camp Lejeune is serious, and it was not just military people who lived on the base, but it was also the neighbors of Camp Lejeune too. But it's a different chemical, different chemistry, different lawsuit than this one.
And your pesticide certainly would be different, but you might talk with a New York law firm, and you can get the number, right, for it, to see if you could be included. You already done it? Any response? Yeah. Okay, please leave your name with John as well.
The other thing I wanted to know is what about the cruise missile facility? Does that mean included in this village and the bad spots and because there's foam everywhere out there.
The hot spots at the base that I know about in the published information are like 6 or 8 red circles on the map.
They've got their burned out airplane fuselage out there that they light on fire with jet fuel and they spray that foam all the time.
Well, last Saturday, we were sitting outside the gate with a group of engineers from WSU, and suddenly the smoke went up and the airplane was on fire, and the fire trucks came with the flashing lights and the big, spraying water. It seems like they were spraying water, though. They weren't spraying foam. And so the current use of the foam at the Air Force Base may be a product that's called C6 rather than C8. And so the carbon chain of C6, they say, is less poisonous than C8. That's what we know. But we don't know very much about what's actually still going on out there because the Air Force Base isn't talking to us, and the Air Force engineers are just speaking engineering. They're not speaking layperson language. And that's a problem that we're chasing them as hard as we can to get them to speak English to all of us, not just to each other.
That's right. And you're a person that has good information to be part of this particular group and share a lot of this that the rest of us don't have any idea about or not knowledgeable of, as is Mike Shields back here, who was a fireman, and you said you had it all over your hands and body and so forth. Never knew it was any more detrimental than soap, isn't that right?
So I'm just going to make the appeal for volunteerism. The more people we have on the committees of volunteers in this organization, the more we can get done, the faster we can go, the more people we can meet, the more impact we can make on the electeds. And so there's a role in the leadership of this organization for several dozen of you that haven't stepped up yet, but we hope you will.
Yeah, and if you're a pipe fitter, you ought to talk to Mike. Isn't that right, Mike, on the second row? Yeah. Okay, and
Terry in the back?
way back.
It's one thing to go for litigation, but where's the solution for these residents? You have to understand, I don't live where you guys live. I live on the other side of I-90, and I've been doing this research for about 7 years about the Grand Ronde and the Wanapum aquifers that we share, and the effects it has on Spokane River. And the issue is if you all look at your property taxes out here in the West Plains, you will probably find a little number talking about a storm res principle number 1. Well, the county was supposedly putting a a water treatment facility at SIA. They took that $25 million from 2005 to 2011. It's one thing for you guys to have all this nasty stuff in your wells. You guys gonna have to just keep putting filters on this? This is not clever. We need to have a solution so at least you guys can have proper water brought to your home. And if you do have to irrigate your fields, that's when those filters can come into play. But at the end of the day, there's got to be another solution on top of this litigation. And I hope that you guys can understand that this is vile, it's disgusting, and it's actually gross negligence. Am I right, sir?
I think you are. I think it's a very good question. And John, I assume at some point in time you're going to talk about the grander solutions of cleanup and that sort of thing in the future.
Well, the goal of this organization is to have just about a meeting every month on some aspect of this problem until it's over. Air Force calls it a forever chemical. We may be in this business forever. But stay tuned for additional meetings on additional specific subjects. We'll dive in as deep as you would like to know.
And I hope you're citing your name because very good questions. And if I can suggest, you go to law school,
That's actually, sir, what I'm about to do. I'm a major in environmental policy and planning, pre-law minor, and hopefully I can
Good.
pass that over.
Good for you. I thought so.
She is in law school.
I thought so. Good for you.
Hank?
Yeah, Jim and John, I noticed you guys are drinking bottled water, and those companies that bottle that water are not required to test for PFAS, so you may be replacing one problem with another.
So where's Hank? Right here. Hank, I wanted to tell you the recent reports I've got is that bottled water has as much PFAS as any other water. I was telling Marianne about that today. And if it doesn't have it, it probably comes from the plastic container. Like I said, I'm worried about the shirt I have on as well. This is, so
Well, bottled water always seems to be the answer, right? You got contamination, and then you get bottled water.
But I want to just take an opportunity here to say that the idea that all Americans have some in their blood, and the penguins in Antarctica, and it's everywhere, it's a synthetic chemical. Every molecule was created in a factory. None of it came out of the ground or out of the sun or out of anywhere. It's all a man-made synthetic chemical. And the CDC blood study of 300 people in Airway Heights says that it may be 50 times worse in our neighborhood than those average Americans who are drinking water and wearing Gore-Tex. So it's important to distinguish how bad it really is. So the potency of the Air Force Base, and just this last statistic, the 70 parts per trillion, which is the level that the Air Force has used to decide who gets a filter, 70 parts per trillion. There's a well test, there's a test well at the Air Force Base that's 182,000 parts per trillion. So compare 70 with 182,000. That's the potency of what's still in the ground at the Air Force Base, and that has not yet begun to be cleaned up.
good. That's a good point, John. That's exactly right. This is an enormous.
So the idea that all Americans have a little bit of trouble, don't get distracted by that story. That's the story of the manufacturers. It's not our fault because it's everywhere. Don't fall for it. And the minute you hear somebody worried about that say, yeah, but not in Airway Heights, not in the West Plains. You gotta understand it's 50 times worse than that background level of Americans.
Just one more quick comment. You know, you hear these numbers all the time, like 70 parts per trillion. It's kind of hard to wrap your head around what does that mean, what does that look like? Well, 1 part per trillion is like one drop from an eyedropper into 20 Olympic-sized swimming pools. And an Olympic-sized swimming pool carries 660,000 gallons of water. So that's 1 part per trillion, and they're talking 70. You know, so that's incredible.
And this is dangerous stuff.
Thank you.
So, my question is, we bought our house 3 years ago. We were never told anything. We learned in April when we came to the meeting at the casino, kind of about what's going on. We did reach out to the Air Force Base. We got a letter that they had sent to the previous owners, and it says none detected, or no minimal levels detected. But it doesn't tell us what was there. They said they were coming out again in August or September of this year. We've never heard anything further about when they're doing the next round of testing, and we're off of Rambo. Have we heard when they're going to be doing this testing?
Well,
Because we knew nothing when we bought the house.
there's no pattern that we've been able to discern. Some people seem to get quarterly tests, get phone calls back, other people don't. And we're pressing the public relations department at the Air Force Base to simply tell us what's going on, and they're not doing that yet. So I can't answer your question, but be persistent. Keep in touch with us about what your frustrations are. We'll bring it up. The more details we know, the better we can be your advocate.
What kind of interactions have you had with, like, say, Senator Jeff Hawley or Kathy McMorris Rogers' office? Any at all?
Well, I
I'll tell you about some of mine later.
Julie and I had lunch with Jenny Graham, and I have been in touch with all 5 of our county commissioners. Several of us have done the 3-minute public testimony, both at the city council and at the county commission. I had lunch with the governor's Eastern Washington representative. His name is Luke Jasmine. He said, what do you need? And I said, how about $1 million for testing and home filters for people that the Air Force Base is not taking care of? That's what we need. That's a start. The ecology engagement with the airport is inviting each of us to send our well tests into ecology. They're making a map that helps discern the risk assessment in the neighborhood. How much risk are you? That's the question. How does this affect me? We're making our own well test map. There's a board out there with white dots. If you know your well test number, don't go home tonight without putting that number on our homemade map. And that's work that Evie and Stephanie are handling out there afterwards. So just go to the left there and help us gather the data that makes the elected officials take notice of what we're talking about.
So up till now, nothing really. Just talk.
Yeah, some talk, some influence, some complaints, some data. Okay, I'll take you along. How about that? That's how it works. That's how government works. There are 2. That's good. That's good. There are 2 projects starting up soon. An Eastern Washington University hydrogeologist by the name of Chad Pritchard got a $450,000 grant from State Ecology to test wells in the Palisades neighborhood. So he's starting up a 2-year study to test 30 individual wells 6 times and to come closer towards proving the extent of the plume from the airport. That's underway. I'm trying to figure out how we put our hand up and say, I'd like to be included in that study. But talk to me tonight if you're in that category of you'd like to have your well tested by that ecology grant. The state revolving drinking water fund wants to send us $100,000 to test more wells than beyond the 30. But that grant has to be submitted by the county. And we've got some opposition from the county to learning the truth about what's in the water at Palisades. So that's some background pressure that we're working on right now. And so we're pushing on reimbursement for private well owners who want to have a test, and reimbursement for the basic level home filter systems for those homeowners with bad water. Those are the things we're pushing on. Anybody who wants to sign up on our government affairs committee, if you've got skills, if you've got experience, if you know how to talk to your electeds, we've got a place for you at the table.
Sign-up sheet?
Where's the sign-up sheet? Stephen, is Stephen here? He's okay. See me if you want to get involved in politics. We'll be around for a while. We've got time for just one last question. Then we're going to adjourn and stand around the lobby punching cookies for another hour. Krista.
So question, as a follow-up on the well testing, the Air Force has been testing our well for every quarter up until this quarter. We got a postcard in the mail saying that they would be out to test within a date range. And then Megan called last week and a half ago and said that they are not going to test right now because there's some issues on their end, which she would not elaborate. Okay, so others have. Okay. Well, I thought the testing for, well, that's approved by the state is either 537 or 533, I think. So what's 1633?
Get the feel for how our people are.
That's great to have them talking about.
Okay.
One part on testing for PFAS, you gotta make sure, I'm Jerry Gertz, I don't need the mic. Yes, sir. Anyway, I'm Deep Creek Ranchette Water Association, we're a small class A, we have to meet all the same standards that the city of Spokane,
Right.
the city of Avery Heights does. When you guys go and test your wells, we've been testing our own because John says the state is supposed to have a grant to test all the public water systems. They ran out of money. I'm still fighting the Department of Health trying to get them to pay for my last test. Tests are about $500 a piece. We use Anatech. They test for 14 different PFAS chemical family. Not just the two. The base is only tested for two, as far as I know.
No, they're testing the whole range. They're just publishing two. They're just publishing the two
Publishing
numbers.
two, testing for all, yeah.
And so those people that they're getting tested by Fairchild, are they actually seeing the results, or are they just telling them you're good?
You know, they give the PFOA plus PFOS number in the letters I get. I wish that this was easy. And I wish that simply listening to all these ideas moved us along quickly towards the solution. It won't. But we have a lot to offer to each other. And I'd just like to close by saying thanks to Jim for the excuse for us to all get together and get better acquainted. And it's a world of worry. There are a lot of things for us to be fearful about PFAS is just one of them. But we can decrease the worry by getting acquainted, by supporting each other, by knowing our neighbors, by finding out what we have in common with our neighbors, because that's where the power to help improve this comes from us all together. And I hope this is not the last time we get to meet, because more meetings are coming up. Be sure we don't lose track of you. We'll do our best to answer all your questions, even when the answers are discouraging. We have to tell the truth, and we have to get the authorities to tell the truth. And I say thank you for coming. Thank you, Jim.
Let me end with the thing, how heartened I am by this group and the conversation that I've heard. Please, please, please keep communicating, keep coming together, and we'll learn more and more, and we'll make that one step at a time progress. And John, thanks again to you and the other boards for getting this together. And taking on this type of issue. Because if you don't have this group that brings people together, then it's very, very difficult, even though it may seem hard as it is.
Thank you. Stick around if you can.